rolling, so you will all get a little reminder that we are recording in progress. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Hutto. I'm the founder at Radcraft, and it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. I am a huge advocate of the craft malt industry and of craft maltsters and of the brewers who use that malt. It is such an important talking point in marketing, not only because it's interesting and story driven, but also because it can help you sell more beer and sell beer at a premium price, because you're using premium ingredients. So without further ado, I'll just give a couple quick housekeeping disclaimers for our chat and say that we appreciate you muting yourself so that we can focus on our speakers. And if you have any questions at all throughout the hour, feel free to pop them in the chat. We are going to do a Q&A at the end so that if we don't cover something that you'd like to ask, you'll be able to jump in there and ask your question either in writing form or with your voice. We have a small enough group today that we can have some discussion. So feel free to put those questions in throughout, and I will try to integrate them while we're talking to our wonderful folks. And then at the end, we'll take time for whatever we didn't get to. I'll also note that there will be a lot of folks watching this after the fact. So if you're one of those people in the future watching, thanks for being here. And thanks to everybody who's here live with us. It's great to see you all. So before I introduce our speakers, I'll say that I know John is a media guest, and if you could raise your hand if you work at a brewery or a producer like a distillery. Awesome. Okay, great. I got a little bit of everything in there. Hi, John. Welcome. And if there are others who join us, I can drop in the DMs and identify the kind of work that everybody does. But it sounds like everybody here either works at a brewery or closely in line with one, or in the beer media industry. So great crew. Well, let's get to it. So study after study that I've been looking into lately confirms that consumers are demonstrating an increase in purchasing from local farms and producers, and an increase in more environmentally friendly products. That's really cool to read, especially given the current climate of the economy that we're all living in. And it's also a reason for me to get on my soapbox. I'll say that if you want to get into this research with me, I've linked one of the studies that I really like in the email that we sent with the Zoom link here. And if you want more, I've got them. So feel free to reach out to me separately if you'd like to be overloaded with studies about consumer behavior. But really, I'd like to talk about consumer behavior to just get on my soapbox and say that people care more about what they eat than ever before. So I think it's our job as professionals in the craft malt industry or on the grain supply chain to show them that they should care about what they drink too. And what we have, or who we have today, are two really incredible people who have been walking that walk and talking that talk for years now. We have Sean Lily Wilson from Full Steam Brewery in Durham, North Carolina with us today. And we have Kayla Stinnett from Cahaba Brewing down in Birmingham, Alabama. These are some really amazing craft malt storytellers. And without further ado, I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you in order of when their businesses opened. So Sean, you are up first.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for spending time on this. And Emily, thanks for putting it together. Really appreciate it. I'm Sean Lily Wilson. I am founder and chief executive optimist, still of Full Steam Brewery, founded in 2010. And we started with a quest to make distinctly Southern beer and exploring what it means to build a Southern beer economy. So we definitely take from the very first batch working with local maltsters.
Thank you, Sean. I have to say that the first time I visited you in Durham was many years ago, and I was in complete awe over the way that a brewery could own ingredients in its messaging. And this was years ago. And I think you've just continued to be such an exemplary set of craft malt storytellers and advocates for our community. And I can't thank you enough. Kayla, my dear, you have the floor.
Hey everybody, I am Kayla. I am the marketing maven at Cahaba Brewing Company here in Birmingham, Alabama. Cahaba started about a decade ago in Eric Meyer's garage. He made a blonde, his friends liked it, they all came together and decided to start a brewery. So we distribute throughout Alabama and have a tap room in Birmingham, and I am very excited to be here to tell you our craft malt story.
Thanks, Kayla. So I met Kayla through the Craft Maltsters Guild. She was one of our wonderful scholarship recipients this last year. And when her email came into my inbox or she came across my desk, I don't remember who emailed who, Kayla, but either way, I came into contact with this person who said, hey, the first ever two-row malting barley just was grown in Alabama, and we're going to make a collaboration beer with it. And my brain exploded and I was like, this person speaks my language. So it's been really fun working with her since. I think I'll get into your stories just a little bit more deeply for our folks to know. And I'll start again with you, Sean. I'd love to hear more about what the Southern beer economy is and how you've cultivated that ethos at Full Steam from day one.
Sure, thank you. So we, as mentioned, started with this idea of exploring what it means to be a Southern brewery. When I wrote the business plan, I remember writing specifically, the West Coast has a style, the East Coast has their kind of vibe. What about the South? And I also talked a lot in the business plan and any chance I get about the vision of a South that retains its identity, but has a progressive forward movement about it. And so that's why we're full steam. We're looking full steam ahead, but we're looking back to North Carolina's agricultural traditions, particularly in tobacco. And we knew that tobacco was a dying industry, of fading and not a source of wealth and opportunity. But we wanted to see if beer could be a means of economic opportunity for farmers, foragers, and maltsters in a post-tobacco North Carolina. And so, yeah, I wrote it into the business plan, and I still live it to this day. I think a lot of what drives me personally, outside of what I wrote on the business plan to raise money and how I pitch it and everything, is just sense of place. And I think that's a thing that really drives a lot of probably why many of us are listening to this recording or on this call now, is that I would suspect a lot of us have our various passions and interests, around sense of place that we care about. And I personally care about the South not turning into our region, not turning into any town USA, and telling stories through farms and the value-added chain that takes a grain from field to malt to our beer. I think is a compelling one, particularly for the progressive South.
Thanks, Sean. So you've worked with a lot of maltsters, or I should say you worked with all of the maltsters in North Carolina. And I think that's really incredible because, I mean, that's just really incredible, period. Good on you for working with all of the folks who are around you as a part of the small grain supply chain. And so I want to give you a minute to shout out to them. And then I was also hoping that you could tell us a bit more about your new Plow to Pint custom malt that you made within this last year, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we have 3 malt houses in North Carolina, and that's really one of those indirect sources of pride for me. I say indirect because I know that our work and all the other breweries that buy from the malt houses help make it happen. And I'll kind of go in a little bit of reverse order. Carolina Malt House, Epiphany, and Riverbend. Carolina Malt House does a fantastic job supplying good base malt. Epiphany we use for specialty malts. The background, I am not actually out in the field right now. I am comfortably sitting in our Boxyard tap room, but I did take this picture, and that was during harvest of grain out in Hertford County with Epiphany. A fantastic day where we were running as fast as we could to get everything harvested before those stormy clouds parted ways and into rain. And I will remember that day very, very fondly. And then with Riverbend, Emily, I don't know if you know this, but I actually know Brent Manning from way back in the day, from before we had businesses. We both worked on the campaign that both Alabama and North Carolina had a limit on beer alcohol by volume, and Brent was actively involved in Wilmington at the time on working with me as president of Pop the Cap, the organization that helped lift the alcohol cap on beer in North Carolina. And we got to talking about what we wanted to do should this cap get lifted, and our mutual interests in craft beer, and our roles within the industry. And he was telling me excitedly about craft malt, and we ended up being, I think, their first customer, and at least a very, very early customer. And we've grown that into that Plow to Pint offering, which is a custom blend of two malts that they provide for us, that we highlight and talk about and tie into our Plow to Pint mission. And we use that primarily in a single hop Pilsner that's 100% North Carolina malt with the Plow to Pint insignia on it. How'd I do? Is that good?
You did wonderfully. I actually linked out to some more Plow to Pint resources so you can have some examples in that email of how Sean and his team are messaging that. Something I love that you've done is you've taken the grain to glass slogan that I think our industry has unofficially adopted, and you've put your own spin on it, and you've carried on that message, but in your own market, full steam way, which is something that I have to take my hat off for, because you all just have such incredible branding. And when you're telling a story, you can just tell that it's full steam. It's somebody over there talking, and it looks like full steam, and it feels and sounds like it. And you all do such a good job of really making that true to brand. So yeah, click out to those resources. Of course, I mean it. I also linked Pop the Cap from some details from the Full Steam website in the chat if you want to learn more. This is a really cool campaign, and you are looking at the guy who just is such a force of nature to help make that happen. Kayla, I'm going to transition over to you now so that you can tell us about the maltsters, maybe plural, who you work with, and tell us all about Birmingham Hellas.
Yeah, so we actually worked with Riverbend Malt House. It was spearheaded by our production manager, Kat Golden, and she just wanted to really get involved in the craft malt industry, and she saw an opportunity with Cahaba, specifically really the Birmingham craft beer scene altogether, because it wasn't just us that used that blend. It was almost every single brewery here in Birmingham, and we're still a relatively small craft beer scene. So it was easier to kind of get that collaboration together. And what we did with that from a marketing standpoint, when she first approached me about it, I was like, okay, let's sit down and talk about this. And I point blank asked her, like, why is this important? Talk to me like someone who knows nothing about craft beer. Talk to me like somebody who has not worked in craft beer marketing for 4 years. And she just sat me down and really explained like why this was such an important thing for the craft beer scene here in Birmingham and on a broader scale. And what I got from her story was essentially threefold. It not only created a better product, a cleaner, more complex Helles, which is a style of beer that we made from that malt blend. It also would benefit Alabama farmers. Cotton has reigned supreme here in Alabama. I'm actually from Limestone County, which is the top producing cotton county in Alabama. That should tell you how much of a big deal agriculture is here in our state. And third, that it really gave the customer insight into what was going into the product that they were consuming. that it was something that was intentionally, not only intentionally grown here in these states, but it was also intentionally malted, intentionally brewed. It was just kind of like an all-inclusive process, kind of diving into that farm to table concept that has just really been prevalent, especially in marketing over the past decade. So we kind of took all of that, as well as the collaboration aspect, since all or most of the breweries here in Birmingham were going to be a part of it, and just rotated that into our marketing story. From the photos that we took, to the videography we did on the brew day, to the posts we made on social media, even to the Instagram live that we did. Always keeping in mind that we need to talk to them, not like they're dumb, not like that at all, but really give them insight into the process and educate them on why this is a big deal. And you always have to keep in mind that the average Joe might not even know what goes into beer. So you just need to educate them from the genesis to it, them lifting that pint up to their mouth and taking that first sip. And that's why we did that Instagram live. It included a sales rep from Riverbend, our brewmaster Eric, our production manager Kat, and actually the man who grew the malt or the barley in Hamilton, Alabama. And we just got them on an Instagram live, and I was like, okay, y'all just talk. Because if there's one thing I learned about working with people in craft beer, is that you can't give them a script. You can't give them any questions beforehand. They already don't want to get in front of the camera. So the best way to make them comfortable is to just set up the camera, sit in the background, and just kind of guide them through the conversation and let it happen more organically rather than it being a scripted thing. And we just let that live on our Instagram profile so anybody can access it. If we've done a couple more collabs with Riverbend since and had some beers come out, and we always try to reference back to that. And of course, during Craft Malt Week, we dove a little bit deeper into that on our social media profiles as well. So what I would do is I would urge you to just, it's all kind of cyclical, especially with storytelling. So just think of it as the broader picture rather than all of its fine points, if that makes sense.
It really does. Thanks, Kayla. That Instagram live that she mentioned is also linked in your resources email for this chat. And it's a great listen. And to your exact point, Kayla, it starts flowing organically. Instagram lives tend to have this awkward first 15 to 30 seconds while everybody figures out their tech, and that's how it goes. But once the tech is figured out, the conversation is so beautiful. And so if tech is something that maybe is a limitation for your business or a challenge, don't be scared of that. It's okay. We're all awkward on Instagram live. And I love that idea of just setting up the camera and letting it flow. I also want to reiterate something that you said, which is over explain the ingredients in whatever messaging you're working on. Of course, your audience is not dumb. Your audience is actually this really educated beer drinking consumer. But a lot of brewers don't even know the difference between some of these malt styles or maybe details about where it came from or how it was harvested. And so giving more information is a way to educate mindfully, of course. We don't want to talk down to people, but educate them. And then those of us who do know the difference between a pale and a pale ale malt are not going to be offended that you got into it. We're going to be thrilled that you got into it, because the more craft malt storytelling, the better. And I know we're all a little biased in this circle, but I can't express that enough. So did you want to say something, Kayla?
No, my AirPods went dead.
Okay, no worries. I saw the mute go off. So this is a question for both Kayla and Sean, and I'll lob it to Sean while Kayla deals with her tech, part of the deal. Why do you and why should we prioritize malt in our storytelling? We're going to go broad.
Yeah. I think you either want to or you don't, honestly. I would say it's not for me to say you should. It's for a business to reflect on whether it aligns with who they are and what message they're trying to make, what stamp they're trying to put out there with 9,000 or so breweries. And we were early on with that message of the why, and consistent, like you mentioned, consistent with it. But I remember in the very early days, I literally got hate email. I got people writing me and saying, you should give up now. This is a stupid idea. Leave the brewing, leave the malting, all this stuff to the Midwest, to the West Coast. And for me, that was just motivation. I was like, yes, we're on to something. When you get hate email for your Basil Farmhouse ale, it means you're onto something. At least that's how I'm wired and how I think. And that was motivation for me. But for another brewery, it might be like, oh, this I can't deal. I'm a totally different brand and a totally different reason for existing. I think central to the idea is that every brewery should figure out why, and that sort of Simon Sinek, the golden circle thing, if you all are familiar with that. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so a lot of times we focus on the product and the outside, the what, then there's the how, and then there's the why. We're pretty clear on our why and why we exist. And I think, all of the brewers that are involved here and listening would hopefully say the same. But not everybody is. And I would just maybe say that if malt or local ingredients is ties to that either sense of place or economy or environment, to look for ways to stitch in local malt as part of the why you exist. The why can take some reasons outside of product to purpose. And the purpose craft malt, I think, is a good segue for a lot of different working toward that inner circle for that why. Ours isn't environmental. Ours isn't taste. It just isn't a direction that we've focused on. It's been more on economy, frankly, on the benefit for keeping dollars local. And there's a lot of reasons, sort of a lot of ways to expand on that. But we started with this whole thing of pioneering the Southern beer economy and quantifying the amount of money that we spend locally, and not just in malt, but local ingredients, but Southern ingredients, but really in North Carolina. And even though, yes, that's our why, but we did change from pioneering the Southern beer economy to powering it, right? Because we knew that we wanted others to join us in this adventure, right? That an economy isn't about just one business. It's a Southern beer business if that's what happens. But a Southern beer economy was a collective of all of us, frankly, right, and more that buy local. And so that drives our why. And then the nuances of what gets us there, for us, it's in sense of place and opportunity, wealth creation, but there's other avenues that you can take it, like I mentioned. Yeah.
I love that, Sean, because your why doesn't have to be everything. You get a lot of byproducts of your why, but I love that you picked a focal point and stayed with it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Kayla, I will send that question your way.
Okay, I would say specifically for Cahaba, we're actually named for the Cahaba River here in Alabama. So the local ecosystem here and feeding into that and preserving that as much as we possibly can is a big part of Cahaba's why in general. So it made sense on several different levels for this to be an endeavor that Cahaba took on, because we're supporting the local economy. We're supporting local agriculture. And we're also kind of cutting down that supply chain, getting it locally rather than, from thousands of miles away. And it also supported our nature of collaboration by getting other breweries involved and showing them that this is something viable for them to do as well. And honestly, I think from those two standpoints, that's something that every brewery should have behind their why, and why it should really be a no-brainer to get involved in craft malt, because like we see what is happening in terms of climate and everything like that. We see what's happening with the economy, and that we really need to feed into our local economy. So no matter really what your why is, you can find a way for craft malt to fit into that.
Well said. Can y'all tell why we chose these wonderful speakers today? They're so well spoken. They know what they're talking about too. So I'm gonna double down on my question. So we've chosen our why, we've honed in our purpose. What are some of the ways? Do you want to jump in, Sean?
No, I'm just gearing up.
He's like, she's going off script already. So we've chosen our why and we've launched our purpose. What are some of the ways, and feel free to use examples from your breweries, that is then spelled out on social media specifically? And Sean, I'll let you go first because I picked on you already.
Yeah, so boy, I'm learning a lot from what Kayla does, and very motivating and inspiring, which is half the reason I say yes to these things, is to learn best practices from others. So thank you, Kayla, for that. One thing that's been good for us in social media is numbers. I was thinking a little bit about how to tie in this concept, and now seems like a good opportunity. That numbers are a fun way to make things come alive. Of course, nothing beats taste and touring and the sort of the sensory component, and that's its own opportunity outside of social media, but probably shouldn't be ignored, is just going to the field and tasting and meeting tasting the grain, meeting the farmer, all those things. I think the malt houses in North Carolina do a really good job of experiential marketing to highlight their place and their mission. For us on social media, particularly because like Cahaba, we're a urban brewery. This isn't where, the brew house isn't behind us here in some bucolic hills type setting. We are in a tobacco city, and so it's definitely been a challenge to tell the story of agriculture, even though Durham has this long history of taking agricultural inputs and making products from it. That's Lucky Strike is like, when I first moved to Durham in the 90s, you smelled the tobacco manufacturing in the air still. But getting to that point of numbers, we do a monthly update that gives the actual totals and tallies. Sorry, my earbuds falling out consistently here. And we put those numbers and post them enigmatically on our front above our door to the tavern without any explanation. And then as often as we appropriately can on our in our social. But it's like, I don't know, 834, 821. Let's just say something like that. That number is how much money that we've spent on local ingredients, the vast majority of it malt, since our founding, since we started. Now, it's not every year. Maybe someday we can get to that point. That would be way cool. But I think ways to sort of get people to be like, what's that number about? Or to contextualize it through itemized spending, itemized purchasing, and weight has been a good way for us to kind of make it come alive. The other thing I'll quickly add is that even though I just rattled off a bunch of numbers there, in general, consumers don't understand any numbers besides 0 and 100. That's just the sad truth of it. And so we tried really hard to be like, okay, this beer is 92% local or 36% local, as we worked our way towards more and more percentage of weight using local malt. We weren't able to do it early on. I mean, we didn't have the supply for it or the consistency for it. So it was like in the teens threshold. And now we have a year-round beer that's 100%, 6-month core 12-ounce beer that's 100% local malt for us, a beer called Biscuit. But we stepped away from putting those numbers, that percentage on our website and on our cans because people didn't know what it meant. They understand 0, they understand 100%. So we've gone to like flat a pint for us means that our beers are brewed with 100% North Carolina malt. We don't talk about the weight of the hops or whether we factor in the yeast brick and water and all that kind of stuff. It all simplify 100% North Carolina malts. And that's been a good pivot for us on social media.
I think that is such a strong strategy. And I'll also say that if your brewery is interacting with the media in any way, media love numbers too. And that's very valuable for that storytelling. And I see John nodding. So thank you for validating that to our media guests today. Okay, Kayla, I know you gave some examples already of how your purpose is playing out on social, but if you'd like to add anything, we would love to hear.
Yeah, so I think the most important thing with how we handled storytelling with our malt journey is paying attention to who you were talking to on social media. What we did was we got photography, which was used in carousels on Instagram, and also created graphics around the Instagram Live that we did on Facebook, which is a completely different audience for us. We pushed out the event really hard because that's where a lot of people find our events. And we also created a video that was more long form content for them to watch too. We also leveraged our downline. Like I sent you a press release to look over just to make sure it was good to go and that it was true when it came to our relationship with Riverbend, and made several edits. It was good to go. So we sent that out to the media to get their eyes on it too. So it was really for us just like knowing which audience was on the platforms we were on and speaking to them correctly, and leveraging honestly the partnerships that we had in place while going through this, like knowing I wasn't alone when it comes to marketing and I could bounce ideas off of my respective team members to help make that happen was really beneficial.
You make such an excellent point that different audiences and demographics use different social media platforms. And so that's an important thing to pay attention to. Even the time of day and the usage thereof, I think that's such a valuable tip. So I'm talking to a couple of folks here today who know their malts and have really dug deep and hung out with farmers to learn, and maltsters to learn the lingo and know what they're doing. And so I wanted to ask them here what advice that they maybe have for others, or to share some tips as to how they've educated their staffs and themselves about craft malts, because naturally it's hard to talk about something unless you know what you're talking about. Sean, do you want to get that one started?
Yeah, so I hear that as a two-parter. We have definitely gone out into the field, taking advantage of field trips and encouraging our staff to participate, and making sure that when we ask them that we're being good to them in the process, not, in other words, paying them for their time. So part of the education process, like when you say, oh, we really would love for you to go join us for Epiphany's field day. It's open up to staff, putting in like, and we will pay you for the time that involved, or the gas or whatever. I think goes a long way to incentivizing staff who maybe part-time bartenders or part-time packaging people or whatever to express in real dollars again that you value their time and that it's important enough to us that we want to pay you to participate in this. So if that's something that those of you who own breweries or want to invest in local malt, have those connections and those opportunities, think about how to extend that. If the budget is there, I would definitely encourage that. And then for the actual kind of meetings themselves and connections, I like looking for unexpected stories to tell. Not that barley, the base and the foundation of what we do, is played out, but there are these fun specialty grains and craft blend stories, these, the one-offs that we're doing, like the Riverbend Plow to Pint malt. But I'm thinking about a cookout at a rice field in eastern North Carolina, where with Tidewater rice and it's malted rice that Epiphany makes for a couple of our saisons, and just going out there and getting to know the crew and participating in their events, because most people like and many farmers like beer, and also finding ways to collaborate and connect with others that might be interested in the product that they make, the farmers grow. So I'm thinking about how the rice is not just us as a purchaser, but really they're there for chefs and food buyers, and some of the events that they've hosted and we've been a part of that bring us closer to our customer, i.e. A restaurateur who has a similar interest in a local ingredient that's grown in North Carolina. And we get to bridge sometimes that gap by saying, we care about this too, we go this direction with it. And, wouldn't it be cool if we collaborated or connected what you do on the food side and what we do on the beer side? And we have those opportunities because of the mutual relationships with farmers and maltsters.
Thanks, Sean. I can't stress enough how much more passionate I got about malt when I started going out to meet farmers and see the fields. It was so many aha moments, and to be able to touch and feel and smell, it made or break it. It made it for me. So if you can give your team the opportunity to do that, I think that's some of the best learning that's out there. Kayla, I will send you over to that same question, please.
Okay, I think the only thing I can add to that is that I know the nature of marketing is just a never-ending curiosity. So I try to approach every single thing I do with that in mind. I'm never an expert on anything other than marketing. So I want to get a real feel for it. I want to learn the ins and outs of it from beginning to end. So that's how we really approached this just project or endeavor in general. It was just with a never-ending curiosity. Why is this important to the production manager? What is our brewmaster think? We chatted with the farmer just to get insight into his experience with it and why he wanted to move to this crop. We chatted with our Riverbend rep and just wanted to know more about why he wanted to bring this to Alabama. So it was just having all those conversations with all of those people, as well as, like you said before, the site visits. We tried to go to Riverbend this year. We couldn't. Our production schedule was way too crazy, but I'm hoping we can go next year. And we've been in talks with the farmer in Hamilton, Alabama, ongoing talks, because as it happens, he is actually 5 miles away from one of our production members' mom's house in Hamilton. And I thought that was the funniest thing. So we are going to go out there at some point and meet him. But like I said, it's just that always be curious. You have never learned enough. There is always more to know, and always come into everything with that, especially craft malt.
Yes.
I'll just echo that,
everything.
Jump in. I love that.
Go,
Yeah.
Sean.
No, I just building off of that. We talk about core values, and we changed one of our core values, was something we haven't done in a decade, from think like an optimist. I'm still chief executive optimist, but I wanted to separate myself from the company's core values, so I get to retain that. But we changed think like an optimist because I think sometimes that can lead to like Pollyanna thinking and like it'll just work out. Think positively, to think with active curiosity. So active curiosity is our like newest core value, and I think that drives a lot of us here, like we said, sense of place. But I wouldn't be surprised, just as Kayla and I share that passion for curiosity, that a lot of us are just naturally curious. Now some aren't, right? You know, I mean, that's, I guess, okay. I don't relate to those people as well, I'd say. But I remain very curious and very enthralled by the opportunities of local grain and local malt. And it's my responsibility to take that curiosity and optimism and enthusiasm and inculcate that to with our staff. And frankly, we do hire around curiosity, and so I just wanted to echo that resonated with me. So thank you, Kayla, for that.
Yeah.
I think it resonated with all of us. And I have to say also that pursuing that curiosity is a social media opportunity for you as well. Going out to those farms, meeting with the farmers, just getting to know the product a little bit more closely, and especially showing them where your audience, where that product came from, be it the field or the malt house. It's beyond just, we are curious as professionals, your audience is curious too. So give them a peek behind the curtain. And I can tell you from running social media for malt houses for more years than I can count now, that those photos of the fields and those photos of the farmers perform better than a lot of other types of content that get put out there. And if you're a brewery, mixing up your regular, your regularly scheduled content of maybe beer in your tasting room and your people with the occasional farmer or field shot is valuable to your audience too. So I want to make sure that we have time to cover any questions that you all have for our brilliant speakers. So I think we're a small enough group that if you want to unmute yourself and jump in, feel free. I have a lot of questions for them, so I could keep going, but I want to make sure that you guys can get in there too, guys and gals.
I'll start.
Thanks, Alan.
My name's Alan. I'm with Double Eagle Malt in Philadelphia. I'm sorry I came to the party late here. And I was distracted. I was doing other things, and then I got another distraction after the whole thing started. So I'm way behind. I don't know what you've covered. I'm curious about how easy it is to connect consumers with the farmers. For anybody who's actually brewing beer or making spirits, and whether or not that has value. We have been pushing this idea of promoting our local family farmers for almost 10 years now, and we've created assets that are downloadable from a Google Drive for every one of our farmers, including pictures of the farmer, the fields, a map of the location, QR codes that the brewer can actually use to put on tap lists, and so a consumer can actually read the little story on their phone as they're sipping the beer that was made with that grain. What we're trying to do is influence brewers to understand that malt is not a commodity that comes from a warehouse, but comes from a field, and get them excited about sharing that story, that I don't know what you call it, the grain to glass story from the farm. And again, our mission is to support family farmers here in Pennsylvania who are looking for ways to stay in business and pass their farms down to the next generation. And does that resonate with you guys?
Yeah.
I mean, it absolutely resonates. It's a matter of, again, it's why I love being a part of conversations like this. Is I immediately go to, oh, we could do this, we could do that, and we are no. I think Emily's done a fantastic job of building up and hyping us up to get you on, but and for all of us to be here. But I'm just as impressed that you're thinking about that, and I want to start implementing some of those things, because we've got 2 locations where we have people who love looking at their phone and love picking up whatever materials is on the table, and one of our challenges is that we don't stitch that story together as well in our urban locations as we need to. So I'm gonna not say, oh, we totally do that. I'm gonna say that's a great idea, and I want to do that.
I'll just tell you a quick success story with regard to that. So every invoice we issue to our clients has an indication of where that grain was grown, and a short link to the Google Drive, so they can download those assets. And we recently, about a year ago, started selling one local Philadelphia Center City brewery. It's a restaurant brewery. They bought all of their base malts from us. So everything they make has our malt in it. And so the owner reached out to me, I don't know, 9 months into that relationship, and he said, "Say, do you have any information about the farmer who grows the grain for you?" And I said, "Tom, check your emails, your invoices. It's all in there." And he said, "Oh, thanks." And then about a month later, I started seeing Instagram posts from that brewer with pictures of our farmers and their fields and whatnot. And I did them a big shout out in my newsletter, and shared that information on my social marketing campaign. But it's very difficult to get that connection to happen. But that was a big plus. That was a big win for me.
So there's 2 different things you have to consider with this, I guess, at least in my experience here in Alabama. I'm from Leicester, Alabama, and no one knows where Leicester, Alabama is. So I grew up, like, I can probably rattle off 10 different people in my high school class that are farmers now. And I think the big difference there between the farmers that want people to kind of come to their farms and visit and the ones who don't are the ones that either have the bandwidth to handle that or already have kind of like the assets in place to do that. Like, does the farm offer tours? Do they have a farm stand that they can visit? Or is the action just to literally get them to the farm to see, oh, this is the farm, I'm going to take a selfie kind of vibe? Does that make sense? Yeah. No.
Well, I don't know if that would be a giant leap for us, I think, to expect a consumer to actually go visit the farm. But
see, and that's why I asked that question. Now, in terms of actually getting the breweries to use the collateral that you're sending them, I think it's important to follow along with the success story, like the one that you mentioned, and produce some kind of like very easy, digestible content around that. Whether it's just like a screen share of you kind of like, hey, this is what we have for you to use. This is a person that used it, and this is what happened for them, kind of thing. And whether it's just like kind of like a simple one-liner at the end of your email that's hyperlinked. Because I know, at least with our production here, like, unless I'm speaking to them face to face, they do not, like, it's impossible to get them to answer my emails, my Slacks, my smoke signals. But if you can just give them like a very easy way to just like see the benefit of that, I think that they would be more likely to use it and take advantage of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's tricky. I understand what you're saying. Getting people to actually see and pay attention to anything you're sending them by smoke signals are probably the most effective way to do it.
Yeah.
And the motivation for the farmer, I think, is my takeaway from that is, why would they want to do that? And sometimes I think there's a bifurcation in amongst farmers, that there's some that are just like, they're camera ready and they're all into it, and they know that this is a way to, maybe they have agritourism angle, or they just like being called out. But I will say, over the years, a lot of farmers are just, some of them, a good number of them around North Carolina, I imagine Alabama, don't drink. They're a little hesitant about their relationship to alcohol, and they certainly aren't that excited about being in front of the camera. So kind of figuring out the motivation, or seeing who's game for it is
And it honestly might be another situation where you can leverage your downline to, for example, with Craft Malt Week, like the Craft Malters Guild sent out assets around that, right? You could have taken those assets, sent out a mass email, included what you have in it too, and been like, by the way, if you're wondering what to post on social media this week, it's Craft Malt Week. You can use all this information that I've already done for you, plus all this information that they've already done for you. And I've written your emails, your blogs, your social media posts for you for the week.
Templates are everything. Kayla, I'm so glad you said that. And I also want to pick on Chelsea, who handles social media for Ska Brewing. Chelsea deals with a lot of information, and if I can give her a neat little package with all the details and all the hashtags and an image, and yeah, exactly, prayer hands, it's like, she has so much to deal with. We don't need her to be an expert in the malt. She's an expert in the marketing and the social media. So the more you can spoon feed it to them, literally, the more likely you are to get picked up. And thanks for letting me pick on you, Chelsea, because I do know a lot of folks who really appreciate that. It makes their job easier, and it makes it so they don't have to run down a rabbit hole to find the information. Well, we have just a few minutes left if anyone wants to jump in with a question. Go for it, Chelsea.
Yeah, I was going to speak to, I am so impressed at the concept of having, you really do have to hit people in so many different ways, because without even realizing it, you're planting seeds all over the place, in your own mind, and the people you're trying to talk to, in your social media. I mean, it's all, even though you might even have it really zipped up and ready to go, people don't even know that they need it yet. So I love that example of like, hey, it's been in your email this whole time, like so convenient for you, it's ready to go. And it makes me think, so I also work with a distillery outside of, or in Palisade, Colorado. And, I've like had some questions. They do everything fruit and grain to glass from the Colorado or Palisade area. And I was asking about the farmers. I was like, this would be so great to highlight the peaches and this brandy. Could we get a photo of them? And the person I was speaking to, he was like, well, if you show up unannounced, you might get shot. Like, like it really is for the people that, just showing up on a farm unannounced. Like, I was thinking like, wow, if we had that relationship, it really gets my mind going. It really helps to help each other, because it really, the benefits just feed back. So I really appreciated this discussion.
Thanks for being here. Thanks to everyone for being here. The fact that we're all here tells me that we're doing something right. 10 years ago, when I started Radcraft, we weren't all sitting on Zoom and having conversations about craft malt. And I definitely explain much less these days what that term means, and hope to explain less and less. And so sometimes it feels like you're beating your head against a wall to just get somebody to open their email or click a link, but that repetition matters, and the showing up repeatedly, consistently really matters. So I'm going to turn it over to Kayla and Sean to share any last thoughts that they might have, and then I'll close her down.
Well, I went first each time, and it'd be really in poor form if I waited because I need more time to think. I agree. It's really encouraging to see the collective across different interests here in industries. I don't know. I'm inspired to figure out a way to bring the farm to our location. We've done that with some success on some esoteric things that we work with, like pawpaw fruit, which is native to North Carolina. And when I heard about the peach person, you might get shot. There's a little bit of that amongst pawpaw farmers because they're this highly sought after fruit and they really don't want visitors. But we had good success with our pawpaw farmer coming to the brewery and doing a tasting and kind of showcasing things on our site and kind of bridging that gap that I mentioned earlier about being in an urban environment. So I'm thinking about how we do the same with grain. We have food at our places, and that might be a good way to tie it in, not just with the beverage, but appropriately with food, and maybe get some maltsters and a farmer at our place. So that's an action item for me, and keep me accountable on that, I would say.
Will do.
I would just say again, don't be afraid to leverage your partners in the industry. I mean, the guilds, the maltsters, the farmers, don't be afraid to reach out for support and for guidance when you're working this into your story, especially your social media, because they want this to grow as well. And they are the experts, and it never hurts to, get that extra support.
Mic drop, Kayla. You've had a couple of those today. Thank you so much. My last thoughts are, please follow at Cahaba Brewing and at Full Steam Brewery on their various social media channels. Use them as great industry examples for folks who know their malt and make it a regular, consistent part of their messaging. And you all know where to find me. So if we got into something today that you want more detail about, or 20 minutes later a question comes up, please send it my way. I'd be happy to connect you with whoever can answer that question if I can't. And I'll just say thank you so much to Kayla and Sean and to all of you for participating today. Cheers, y'all. Happy Malt Week.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Emma.